Marketers often end up scaling what looks performant, usually lower funnel channels, right? While overlooking more incremental or brand building tactics like, say, CTV, that don't show up in your last click reports, but often drive long term incremental impact. So, based on my experience, the aha moment for the CMO typically comes in seeing the contribution table and the ROI curve by channel, showing not just what worked, but what actually cost the lift, and within certain confidence intervals and within some predictive context. This calls out potential ways to drive more results or better results, and also to arrest ads wastage. That's when things click and starts making sense for the marketers.
You are listening to Full Funnel.
Hey, Full Funnel crew, welcome back. I'm Rohit, your resident marketing nerd and your guide to AI first marketing. Today, we are taking a sledgehammer to one of marketing's biggest pitfalls, touch-based attribution. My guest is none other than Rajeev Nair, my co-founder here at Lifesight, and the product brain behind our unified measurement platform. Rajeev has spent almost a decade proving that counting clicks and impressions doesn't equal causality, and he's here to explain what truly moves the revenue needle. Rajeev, great to have you on. Quick icebreaker before we geek out. Please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit more about your background and what got you into measurement.
Thank you, Rohit. Hello, everyone. I'm Rajeev Nair, co-founder and chief product officer at Lifesight. I've been part of the Lifesight journey since day zero of Lifesight, and it's been 8 incredible years now. Before that, I wore multiple hats across software engineering, quality assurance, business analysis, and product management, mostly in the financial services domain. In my last role before Lifesight, I was building digital products for retail banking and wealth management at multinational banks. Academically speaking, I hold a master's in technology, another in financial engineering, and recently completed another one in advanced statistics and causal inference, which, as we'll see, plays a big role in how we think about measurements today.
Amazing. That's quite the background. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey. So you've definitely one of the few people who have witnessed more attribution fire drills than most people out there in the market. What's that one moment, maybe Q4 budget crisis or some other scenario where last click measurement, essentially touch-based attribution, any form, finally proved that it was lying, right? And what was that hidden bias that it finally exposed?
Interestingly, one pattern we have seen across brands in 2025 is a shift towards tighter, more efficiency-focused media budgets. Many are either holding spend flat or cutting back compared to last year. I believe this is driven by pressure on margins and a push for profitability. This also could be influenced by some larger macroeconomic headwinds. But here's the catch. Let me pick a very specific example here. A particular brand that we were working with had a blended return on ad spend of about $3 to $4, right? Which means they were getting $3 or $3 to $4 back in top line revenue for every dollar spent on media. Right. Yet, when they reduced spend early this year, the actual revenue loss was disproportionately high, sometimes upwards of $5 or even more than that, right? Which means for every dollar that they cut in their media spend, they were losing $5 or even more than that. That's a clear sign that traditional attribution was misleading them. It completely missed the incremental value that channels were driving. And the same mistake happens in reverse as well, right? While scaling up. So if you're not measuring true incrementality, you're just flying blind in the world of marketing. As we head into Q4, I think one of the most valuable exercises for marketers is to pause and ask, do I understand the incrementality of each channel or tactic, at least within a range, with some confidence? And have I established even a basic level of causality between my marketing actions and the outcomes that I care about? If the answer is no, it's time to rethink how you measure performance.
Absolutely. I think there's a ton of gut check kind of things that we can do to kind of quickly see that whether or not, your measurement is based on causality or not, right? Perhaps can you list like the top 3 like systemic traps that touch-based attribution kind of presents, right? Where brands kind of overlook and then only react once growth stalls.
Yeah, click-based attribution gets a few critical things completely wrong. First, it's heavily biased towards bottom of the funnel, click-heavy channels. No surprises there. Second, it fails to separate correlation from causation. And third, it can't capture interaction effects, right? How different channels work together, or how marketing interacts with other factors like pricing changes, promotions, seasonality, macro trends, or even your own media activities. Right? As a result, marketers often end up scaling what looks performant, usually lower funnel channels, right, while overlooking more incremental or brand building tactics like, say, CTV that don't show up in your last click reports but often drive long term incremental impact.
100%. 100%. Completely agreed on that. So let's kind of break down your methodology, right? The unified measurement process for listeners who are like starting from zero, right? Can you just paint the picture for them? How does one take on, MMM, geolith experiments, incrementality testing is snapped together into like this unified view? Could you perhaps shed some light on that?
Sure. So let's first keep aside the technicalities of MMM, incrementality testing, causal inference, and all of that, and start with the core issue, right? Measurement is always a relative process. So there's the saying that when you measure a table with a ruler, you're also measuring the ruler with the table.
Right.
In marketing, when we measure Facebook or Instagram or CTV or out of home, we are inherently comparing them to each other. So the first question becomes, do we have a consistent common measuring tape?
Yeah.
Think of it like this, right? If we are testing two students in math, you can only fairly compare them if they take the same test.
Yes.
Similarly, you can't compare a click heavy channel to one that does not generate clicks unless they are evaluated through the same lens. That's problem number one. We need a common measurement framework. The second challenge is interaction effects. I think I briefly touched upon that in a while back. It doesn't matter how great Meta or TikTok is as channels, or how great your creatives are. If your pricing is off, your results will suffer. If your distribution is poor, or if your social presence is not as good as your competitors, it will reflect in your outcomes. So we can't just compare Facebook to Google. We need a framework that accounts for how paid media interacts with other business levers like price changes, promotions, and all of that. The third layer is the decision hierarchy. Not all marketing decisions are the same. Business literature talks about three levels of decision making: strategic, tactical, and operational, right? So the prominent management gurus like Peter Drucker, Robert Anthony laid this out decades ago. And disciplines such as supply chain management, operations planning, and even organizational designs have followed these hierarchies closely, and marketing is no different. So this is the essence of unified marketing measurement, a framework that aligns measurement tools to the type of decision being made. This is where we have MMM, incrementality testing, and attribution. Right? MMM is for strategic decisions. It aggregates data over a time, either daily or weekly, and quantifies the impact of multiple drivers on business outcomes. It treats all channels consistently, so it passes a common ruler test. Then comes incrementality testing, which supports tactical decisions. It's about running controlled experiments to understand which channels or tactics or your creative strategy or targeting approaches, etc., actually drive incremental lift. So you can double down or pull back with confidence over a quarter or shorter time frames. And then comes attribution, which is for more operational decisioning, right? It helps you optimize within a channel. Say, comparing two Facebook campaigns by their ROAS or CAC is still relevant, but it's not reliable for comparing across channels like Facebook versus Google search, because it doesn't account for broader causal effects and interactions. So bringing all of these things together under one consistent framework gives you a unified reality based view of what's working and what's not. And we call this measurement orchestration, and it's a very tight knit process where each of these techniques complement one another.
Right, right. That's a great explanation. Yeah, I think for the listeners, I think maybe you can also give them like a plain roadmap, like a plain English layman's terms roadmap on like the first 90 days of actioning this, right? For a brand that's essentially trying to, move away from touch-based attribution and you move towards unified measurement. How would they go by this?
So the 90-day roadmap, it really depends. Like most things in life, it depends. And in this particular case, perhaps it depends on the size of the brand. For smaller brands, almost everything you do is a test. But the good part is that even small interventions can lead to a clear and measurable outcome for smaller brands. So measurement feels very intuitive. And as long as you're working with just one or two channels, you could
Everything is
adopt this up.
incremental at that time, right?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, you could adopt this approach. But once you go beyond two channels and once you have a few few variables to sort of work with, complexity creeps in, right? And I think of this as the three body problem in physics, which is once you have multiple forces acting at once, the interactions become too complex to solve deterministically. That's when you need to go for a more rigorous scientific approach to measurement, right? And that is typically done through modeling. Now for such brands, this is what a typical 90-day process would look like, right? So you should start by building a model, an model. Once your historical data is available, it usually takes a few days to get your first version of the model out. And this model should give you certain estimated ranges of outcomes for every tactic or for every channel. Right? For example, it should be able to tell you that your Facebook prospecting could be delivering incremental ROAS of between 2x to say 3x, or TikTok might show an incremental CAC between say $10 to $20. So it gives you certain ranges and not precise numbers, but that's where you start the process of measurements. And from this you go to the second step, which is to do incrementality testing. You can design certain experiment to test certain hypotheses, and the model that is now live for you will help you spot certain hypotheses, like CTV looks high impact, but we are not fully confident. So you can then validate these with incrementality tests, start with simple single cell tests, and gradually move to more complex multi-cell experiments, right? And then comes attribution, or to be more precise, attribution that's adjusted by incrementality reads from the previous steps. And during this process, you can begin calibrating your existing attribution models using incrementality multiplier, essentially adjusting your ROAS and CAC metrics to better reflect causal impact. And by following this structured path, brands can typically uncover and fix at least 10% of wasted ad spend within the first 90 days, right? We have seen this pattern repeat again and again, and the clarity it brings is a real unlock for smarter, more profitable growth.
Interesting. That's a great deep dive into how to get it actionable. Can you tell me a little bit more about the technology under the hood when it comes to Lifesight's causal engine, right? You're looking through all this input data like ad spend and promos and all kinds of other data. In simple terms, what inputs does it actually need? And what's the output, that aha moment that a CMO can first see?
So yeah, first to talk about the aha moment. So based on my experience, the aha moment for the CMO typically comes in seeing the contribution table and the ROI curve by channel, showing not just what worked, but what actually cost the lift, right? And within certain confidence intervals and and within some predictive contexts, right? This calls out a potential ways to drive more results or better results, and also to arrest ad spend wastage. That's when things click and starts making sense for the marketers. Now, to also give a brief overview about what technology lies under the hood, we bring in hybrid approach of three algorithms of sorts, right? So the first algorithm is a Bayesian structural causal modeling approach, which is where once we have access to historical data, we typically look for 2 years of daily data. That's what's recommended. Once we have historical data, we try to establish the causal DAG, or a causal graph, which encodes how various factors are interacting with one another. So that's where we start. And once we have that in place, we run ML models on top of this data. And these ML models are informed by the causal structure that is first assumed and then validated with the data. And this ML model's primary responsibility is to infer incrementality, right? And once we do this, the next step is to adopt various forecasting algorithms. We do something called as ensemble forecasting, and then we adjust this forecasting results with the incrementality that we infer from the ML algorithm. So it's a hybrid of three things that's coming together, which is structured causal modeling, machine learning based inference, and ensemble forecasting, and where these three things sort of talk to each other. So that is perhaps a very high level view into what goes under the hood to make causal modeling possible at Lifesight.
Interesting. So yeah, perhaps you could share a recent case study where this causal analysis method kind of completely contradicted the multi-touch attribution insights and essentially redirected the budgets to the real growth levers.
Yeah. So it happens all the time, especially with, say, Google branded search, CTV, TikTok. So Google branded search typically shows inflated ROAS in attribution reports, while channels like CTV and TikTok are consistently undercredited. So when budget cuts come around, those under attributed channels are usually the first to go. One recent case study stood out, which is a brand reduced its media spend by $1 million in Q1 2025
Right.
compared to the same period in 2024. And they saw a $4.5 million drop in revenue. Most of the cuts came from CTV and TikTok, as these channels were undervalued by traditional attribution, but that our causal analysis showed were actually key growth drivers.
Yeah, that's the
Even a ba-
advertising doom loop, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And even a basic exploratory data analysis hinted at the issue, right? They were pulling back from channels that had strong causal impact.
Hmm.
Attribution told one story, but causality told the truth.
Yeah.
This was a classic case where relying on last touch metrics led to costly decision mistakes.
Interesting, interesting. So yeah, so I think after you get all these insights, there's a lot of these decisions to be made. But all of these dashboards that you have produced in the platform doesn't really matter. The CFO can't really understand or trust them, right? How do you translate these incrementality insights to essentially what you call boardroom ready storytelling?
Yes, so there's a unique challenge of unified marketing measurement solutions, I guess. It has to bridge the two worlds of statistical rigor and interpretability for marketing leaders.
Yeah.
There are a couple of ways in which we navigate the space.
Hmm.
One is we try to build a very intuitive actioning layer on top of this very complex algorithms that works under the hood, right? So we create
Yeah.
this intuitive layer of planner, which we believe is very easy to consume for the marketers, and they could ask various what if questions to this planner and see the outcomes.
Yeah.
That's part one of the solution. Part two of the solution is to help them with relevant dashboards. We
Hmm.
have templatized a bunch of CMO, CFO reports where we sort of bring in the more relevant metrics for the marketing leaders, right? Where we call out the incrementality adjusted P&L numbers.
Yeah.
We call out such summaries which could be then easily consumed and taken forward by the marketers without
Yes.
getting stuck in the statistical nuances of what goes under the hood.
Interesting, interesting. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is the fact that this new measurement approach is essentially doing a lot of change management within the organization, right? Because changing tooling is technically quite easy, but changing the minds and the training of all these executives is extremely difficult. What playbook have you used to kind of coax these owners, to move away from the current methodologies to this more experiment driven culture? And also, how do you align these marketing and finance teams?
Yeah, so we have been on this journey of building and evangelizing unified marketing measurements for the past 2.5 years. And we have definitely seen a shift in a marketer mindset during this
Absolutely.
time. And honestly, a lot of credit goes to the broader ecosystem, educators, thought leaders, operators like yourself who have been steadily pushing the conversation forward. That said, moving from pixel worship to experimentation isn't just about tools, it's about incentives and culture. Most channel owners and performance marketers today are still measured against attribution based KPIs like
Yes.
ROAS, CAC, last click conversions. These metrics reward short term, bottom of the funnel wins, right? So it's
Hmm.
only natural that they keep optimizing for them. What we do is start by shifting the conversation. We
Hmm.
guide teams towards focusing on three core pillars. Number one is incrementality. What would have happened without this activity? Number two is to think about marginal returns. What happens if I add or cut $1 spent? Then to pursue profitability, right? Seriously, are we growing top line at the cost of bottom line? Incrementality adjusted profits is one thing that we focus in our platform in
Yeah.
all our reports. We also try to meet marketers where they are today, right?
Hmm.
Instead of saying attribution is bad, we show them how attribution can be calibrated using incrementality multipliers, or how a lift test revealed something that attribution missed. Once they see the gap, they start to lean in. It's never an overnight shift, but when teams realize that chasing attributed ROAS can leave real money on the table, or worse, lead to wasted spend, they begin to embrace experimentation not as a risk but as a strategic edge.
Yeah, I mean, I think marketers have been doing experimentation for a long time, especially the more advanced ones when it comes to creative testing and stuff like that. But when it comes to this measurement testing, I think is something that needs to still be built up within the organization, right? So, can you tell me a bit about the cultural ritual within Lifesight, and what keeps the team, hypothesis driven. I'm sure you also practice what you preach. Could you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so we are constantly innovating in the modeling space, right? So we want to adopt better modeling practices. So to make sure that we have the right learnings, we are always all of us in the marketing science team and the product team, we practice something called as parameter recovery process, right? Which is where we are trying different ways to model on synthetic data and recover the right coefficient or very close coefficient. So before we make any modeling changes in our platform, so we have got something called as a Lifesight modeling playbook, which all of us follow when it comes to building models on behalf of our customers. But before we make any change into that playbook, all of us compete in making sure that our approach is better in recovering the parameters and coefficients. So there's an always on competition in our marketing science organization where we are, in a way, we have certain hypotheses that perhaps doing this particular modeling approach is better. Then we test that on synthetic data that one of us would generate and give it to the other marketing scientist, and he will try to recover the coefficients that the data generator has embedded into that synthetic data, right? So it's a always on competition. So that's become a sort of a culture, especially within our marketing scientists. But at times, our product team also sort of chimes in, and we also try to sort of change the playbook and test if we are doing a better job at recovering these parameters, right? So that's one culture which emerged naturally. It wasn't enforced top down or anything. It sort of emerged naturally within our marketing scientists, and something that I'm also quite proud of.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, that's always great to hear the evolution of the teams. Moving to more futuristic outlook, all these autonomous agents and, AI has started to edge their way into the measurement space as well. Where do you see that going? Where do you see that adding value in the measurement world? And, what judgment calls you think would still be driven by humans in the loop?
So we definitely see a lot of AI adoption happening in very near future. So the way I personally look at this measurement space is that most of the things that we are trying to implement are time tested approaches, right, which have been around for decades. What
Yeah.
we essentially trying to do is we are trying to make it more seamless and more adaptable, making it automatable or semi automatable, right?
Right.
So as part of doing this, we approach this in three different ways, right? So first thing is we have built a very robust engineering infrastructure around this measurement solution stack. We have also adopted causal AI techniques, as I've been referring to structural causal modeling. So we have been adopting these causal AI techniques, which is primarily intended to fix the limitations of regular ML based models. So part one of AI adoption, right? Causal AI in itself is sort of becoming very relevant, and there are a lot of very innovative solutions that's coming in that space. So
Yeah.
that's part one. And part two is where generative AI and agentic AI and agentic processes are now getting adopted to make it easier for marketers to first thing consume the insights so that they could perhaps have conversations with their own data or with the model outcomes in natural language, and also eventually can drive actions more seamlessly. So we see all of these things coming together, and yeah, super excited to see how it's going to evolve in over the next couple of months to next couple of quarters.
Yeah, yeah, it'd be super exciting. I think the world is really moving towards as much autonomous processes as possible, and measurement is definitely going to be included in that world. So, can you name one industry myth that you hope will be dead by 2027? Let's say.
One myth I really hope is dead by 2027 is the idea that attribution based metrics like last click ROAS or CAC are the gold standard for measuring marketing performance. I'd love to see a future where incrementality becomes the default KPI, where
Yeah.
marketing teams are evaluated not on how many conversions they captured, but on how many conversions they cost. That shift alone, I believe, would fundamentally change how budgets are allocated, how
Yeah.
campaigns are run, and how success is measured.
100%. 100%. All right. So let's move on to the lightning round. So one sentence answers.
Mhm.
What's a KPI you check before coffee?
Holdout accuracy of all our models in production.
Awesome. What's the most overrated marketing metric today?
CAC and ROAS from self-reported attribution from ad platform.
What's an AI tool that you've been excited to use this quarter?
I'm a big fan of Notebook LM. So
Okay.
Notebook LM has had the biggest impact on my productivity. And I've recently also started using an app called Hughes. It's
Interesting.
built by the creators of Notebook LM. It's like a personal podcast for you based off your inbox. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's a measurement myth you'd bury forever?
Yeah, so this is essentially a data science myth and not just a measurement myth, which is that big data is better than small data, which is not always the case.
Yeah. Yeah. What's a quick win for brands who are still stuck in click thinking?
So to measure incrementality, it's actually easier than what it appears on surface. So you could change your budget, you could do a holdout test, make certain meaningful changes in your budget, and see if that's creating a meaningful difference in your outcome. In a lot of cases, it's difficult to quantify that. That's when you'll have to approach a more formalized system of measurements. But instead of just relying on click-based numbers, I think marketers should start playing around with the spend values and then compare the outcomes against these changes that they do.
100%.
Yeah.
That's
So that's
that's
more than
basically
a
the
sentence,
start
but
of the causal
yeah.
thinking, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, that's been an amazing chat, Rajiv. Thank you so much. That's a wrap, everyone, for this edition of the Full Funnel Podcast. Rajiv, huge thanks for dismantling this whole world of touch-based attribution and laying down the groundwork and framework for unified measurement and a roadmap that we can all act on. For everyone listening today, if today's conversation sparked any fresh idea, hit follow so you don't miss another episode, and share this one with someone, a teammate who's still glued to the touch-based attribution metrics like last click and so on. And please follow Rajiv as well on LinkedIn. He posts some very cool stuff about measurement. We'll be back next week with another guest pushing the boundaries of AI-driven growth. Until then, keep testing, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next full funnel. Thanks, Rajiv. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you, Rohit.